Hi, I'm Nick Labarro, movie critic for NovaStream Network.
And I'm Georja Malt, founder of With G Digital and lover of literature.
And welcome to The Book Was Better, a monthly podcast with myself and Georgia in which we read a popular novel, watch the film that the novel was turned into, and discuss the age-old debate of what was better, the book or the film. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Thank you for coming along on this grand literary and cinematic adventure with Georgia and myself. And if you're returning listening, thank you so much for supporting the show. Basically a full year of the show done. I think we kicked it off in around March
that's
this
so
year.
exciting.
And here we are in December.
Yeah.
We're not sick of each other. We're not sick of the show.
I love that we didn't miss our 10th anniversary of the show, but you've just missed your 8-year anniversary with Rhiannon.
I'm gonna defend myself here. Is that Rhiannon and I both forgot it was our anniversary.
It was a mutual forgetting.
It was a mutual forgetting, and because it's 8 years, we'll be like, we'll just wait for 10. I mean, if I'm still allowed to be her boyfriend for the 10-year anniversary, she'll
I'll put in
decide
a
that.
good word for you.
Mate, I appreciate that. Like a professional reference on a resume.
Yeah.
Since we're now business partners in this podcast, your word is definitely a lot stronger to her than mine. But for you returning listeners, if you have already subscribed on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, iHeartRadio, as always, thank you. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you. This is an exciting way to wrap up the year because I will say this, spoiler alert for the end of the episode, this isn't technically our final episode of the year, but it's our final normal episode of the year. We might have a little, let's say, present for you at the end of this episode for the time of year. But before we get into that, for the December show, Georja Malt, it was your pick. Tell us what we are reading and watching this month.
It was. So I picked The Murder on the Orient Express, which I had neither read the book nor watched the film.
That's interesting because this is Agatha Christie.
Yeah, big name in murder mystery.
Big name in literary history as well. Yeah. So I was actually kind of shocked when you said you hadn't read this. And obviously the famed character Hercule Poirot. So yeah, that was a bit of a shock that you hadn't at least read the book. The movie, I can understand it based on our dynamic in this show.
I'm not a big crime fan.
Right.
Which upon now I've read it, I would classify as crime, but it's not like a serial killer's on the loose and it's like, there's definitely like a bit more.
I think definitely, and look, you can confirm or deny whether this is true. When I suggest crime genre things to you, you immediately think that I'm talking about completely disgusting,
like Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs.
I'm more like going into more horror when I think of
Seven,
crime.
like that sort of thing, like
disturbing.
Yeah. So whereas this is a crime novel, it's a murder mystery too. Mm-hmm. But it's the murder mysteries of old. You know what I'm saying? Like it's the
ones that used to be on radio, like
100%.
It's more about like the problem solving and
it's about the detective rather than like how the gross this can get, right?
Itself. So yeah, exactly.
But obviously, having not read it, you were absolutely aware of Agatha Christie.
Yes, I was.
Had you read any of her stuff?
No, I hadn't actually.
And this would be regarded as like most famous.
Well,
work?
Actually, it's not her most popular book.
Interesting.
Her best-selling book is actually. It's one that had a bit of controversy. They changed the title of it. I actually can't say the original title on mic. Yeah.
Okay.
And
do you have it?
I can't remember what it's called now. Sorry, I could have.
No, that's okay. When we do The Book Was Better up late, we can discuss it then.
You know what? I read into the plot and it sounded great, but let me just look it up, Chrissy.
No, absolutely.
Christie best-selling book. So but I don't think it's ever had any movie adaptations.
Oh, okay. I can absolutely see why you can't say that. Yep.
Yeah, not good. Oh, and then there were none.
And then there were none.
Retitled version, which I don't think there's ever been any film adaptations.
I don't believe so. No. And Agatha Christie adaptations have been something that are actually. Yes, film for sure, but like predominantly radio shows and TV miniseries,
and then obviously the Mousetrap, her play, which is
huge, right?
Is obviously very famous.
Very famous, and I don't know if you saw See How They Run last year.
I did.
Which is a take on Agatha Christie's Mousetrap, in which they are performing the Mousetrap in it, which is kind of fun. Like I like that take on it. So and like even as we've learnt over this year, I can't believe it's been a year. Over this year. That I wasn't the avid reader that I am now. I was aware of Agatha Christie's impact on especially pop culture in the crime, murder, mystery genre. It seems like every every murder mystery-esque, whether it's sincere thriller or like parody comedy, always had this formula. There was like detective parodies of Hercule Poirot and stuff like that. So it's a very significant it has a very significant place in pop culture, I would say.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting because she wasn't overtly successful at the beginning. Like she actually got a lot of rejections, and then Hercule Poirot is the character that that was her first kind of published.
She has a load of
to
books
success.
now,
She does,
right? Yeah.
and so many Hercule Poirot. And something I was surprised to learn was that it. You know, I always thought it was Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, but that's just not true. There's, so many, and there's like the 20s, 30s, post World War II. Like the sheer amount of
the
these
volume
books,
that she has created.
I think out of Hercule Poirot's stories, I would have to say probably Murder on the Orient Express is the most well known, I would say. Okay. And then it actually wasn't called that originally.
Oh God.
It was actually first published as something else.
Agatha, she loves the title change. The first one makes sense.
The Murder in the Callous Coach, which I think is the coach.
The coach in which the murder takes place. Yeah.
Yeah. So and it was the story was actually based on a true life crime.
I like it.
Yeah, so it was the kidnapping and murder of Charles Lindbergh's son in 1932. So that had a prestigious family. The child was kidnapped and then the ransom was paid, but the child was found dead. So that obviously... If you not trying to give any spoilers, but if you've watched this film, you'll know that's very tied. That's
massively tied, and you would argue that the story is tied to like what would happen post that event, I guess, right?
Yeah, and then
fallout of it. Yeah,
Agatha Christie herself once caught the Orient Express, and then few months later, the Orient Express got stuck in Turkey in a snowstorm. So there was a few real life.
There's a lot of inspirations coming from there. That's very interesting.
And this isn't the first time it's been adapted to screen. This Kenneth Branagh one,
second time. So there's a film that came out in 1974, I believe.
And I know she wasn't that happy with it because he didn't go all the way with the mustache.
No, he didn't. which is funny though, considering how Hercule Poirot is described in the books.
An egg-headed Belgian man with a funny mustache.
With a funny mustache. But even still, didn't go all the way with the mustache. And then I feel like how we hear him described in the book, like this mustache goes like a little further as well, which
and
is great.
when he's asleep on the train and he has the mustache protector.
It's so good.
I love that part.
It's so funny. I love it. I love this film. So this is the second film adaptation. Kenneth Branagh, who I guess is no stranger to literary adaptations. If you went to primary or high school, you've probably seen a film version of Henry V, Much Ado About Nothing, Hamlet, all created, usually written, directed, and starring Kenneth Branagh. But he's also like I'm a big fan of his work in general. Most famously, he's the director of Thor, the first Thor movie.
Oh, okay.
And he also did the Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit movie reboots from the Jack Ryan series.
I definitely have heard of them, but
they may pop up in the show. Who knows? So he definitely understands action thrillers well, but his bread and butter is classic literary adaptations. So it seemed like when this was announced, it was like a match made in heaven that he was going to direct these films. He didn't write the screenplays, so a screenwriter called Michael Green wrote the screenplays. And I say screenplays because now there's 3 of these. There's a trilogy of modern day imaginings of Hercule Poirot. So.
I mean, respect, you know where you're good and you know where you need a hand.
Exactly right.
And that's where things often go wrong, where people think they can do everything.
And you know what?
And they cannot.
No better than using a now Oscar-nominated screenwriter as well. So Michael Green, he did Murder in the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, and then the most recent, A Haunting in Venice. He was nominated for an Oscar for Logan, the Wolverine Hugh Jackman film. He was a screenwriter on that. But he's also done like Blade Runner 2049. Like he's done these really epic. He also did the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern. We don't talk about that, and that's fine. You can't win them all. But I think he's a screenwriter who I'm very interested in. Based on the work he's done. So, it's second film adaptation of this book, but it's had plenty of TV movies, plenty of TV series, and plenty of radio show adaptations. So it's a very well-known piece of work. Interestingly enough, for this one and the 1974 one for its time, huge casts. You got a lot of characters. You got a lot of very significant characters. So you're going to have a huge cast. Michelle Pfeiffer in this film Originally supposed to be played Mrs. Hubbard. Originally supposed to be played by Angelina Jolie.
There you go.
Interesting.
What happened there?
Maybe Johnny Depp. they did a film together that tanked notoriously. So maybe
The Tourist?
The Tourist, yeah. Which was
Never
loved.
Saw it.
And you're not missing out on a single thing. So, but Angelina Jolie was initially supposed to play Mrs. Hubbard. So, but what I like about this film and what I am a very big fan of Kenneth Branagh's visual direction. And you see it a little bit in this, that he's got a bit of a keen eye for what they call Dutch angles. So it's angles that are on a little bit of an angle. I guess the camera shots that are on an angle. He doesn't mind, he has these fun little intricate shots when we get the bird's eye views of all the cabins and stuff. But he shot this on 65 millimeter film, which is kind of abnormal these days. A lot of things are shot digital. But 65 millimeter, which is also commonly used by people like Christopher Nolan or Quentin Tarantino, it's these big frames. So you can fit a lot into the frame and have these sort of grandiose sets and things where you have 12 people.
I was going to say, would that be
scene.
an instance where he's walking through and they're all sitting at their tables?
Totally,
in the
yeah, absolutely. And you can capture it all on there with the right lenses and stuff. And you think to things like, I don't believe they were all shot in 65, but Tarantino's A Hateful Eight, you're working with a lot of characters as well. Nolan used it on Dunkirk, where you've got literal armies of people you're capturing. So it has this really fun visual aesthetic to it. And a lot of that is the film that it's shot on. $55 million budget, which is, above modest,
I mean, it's got a big cast.
Big cast in there. It's a big set as well. There's actually a fair few, I would say, visual effects in there as well, especially with a certain, cavalcade of snow. But it made $352 million worldwide, so it was very successful.
Yeah, that's good.
Incredibly successful, which obviously has now spawned its 2 sequels. Despite being not as critically well received, 60% for the critics on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 52 out of 100 for Metacritic. But the audiences did not like this film at 54%.
Yeah, you know what?
What?
I'm probably one of them.
Oh, Georja Malt. No, because I like this film. I like it a lot.
Okay, it's going to be interesting, isn't it?
I'm excited. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, right.
Chat.
Okay.
So, let's break it all down. So you obviously, did you read the book first or did you watch the film first?
I read the book first and I finished it that afternoon and watched the movie that night. So
was that out of excitement? Because you really enjoyed the book.
It was down to the wire because we were recording 2 days later and I was busy.
That's typical of us.
Yeah, I was like, that's pretty standard for this show.
It's a monthly show where we, a month out, pick out.
I've been reading the book in the car in your driveway before finishing it. So, I mean, it wasn't as down to the wire.
I'm so glad you did that because there's been times where I've been sitting here quickly trying to hammer through pages.
And Ree's like, it's Georgia at the door. And you're like, don't
I'm like, get her back in her car. Tell her it's the wrong house. We're busy people. We're very busy people.
This is passion. We're doing this out of love.
We do it out of... I'm just doing it to learn how to read. So you hammered through the book and watched the film. Okay, so but what was the initial reaction to the book then?
I love the book.
The book is pretty damn good.
I just thought it was so clever the way it's written and so interesting the way he gathers information and just records it. And I had a totally different hype because I had no idea what the twist was.
Oh, that's even better.
It was not spoiled me.
Yeah.
Reading the book, my mind was going somewhere completely different.
Okay.
Would you like to hear?
When we...
Or when we reveal?
When we get towards the end, but I want to hear where you thought it was going. And then, because I think that's pretty interesting.
I loved it. And I think the thing was that I loved the book so much and it felt to me in the book that it was very much a genuine story of a detective working a case.
Yes.
In the movie, some part too positive and some part to its detriment. I just felt like there was a lot more theatricality added.
Totally. It was an ensemble piece, right?
It was just very some things, but to me, some things were a bit blaringly done for a cinematic benefit, but it just didn't feel super organic. My biggest criticism comes down to the action scenes, which were completely not in the book at all.
Totally, yeah.
And I just felt because they weren't in the book, they didn't. There's
a bit of a jarring tone to it, yeah.
And I also just think the way
because they kind of turned Hercule Poirot into an action hero at one point.
He's running after.
When they're basically parkouring their way down the scaffolding, right?
Yeah, and then there's the scene where someone pulls a gun on him and someone gets stabbed and.
I didn't mind that. I understand. I thought to me that was an interesting addition.
Yeah.
Having obviously then read the book and realizing it wasn't in there when that character is stabbed, I was like, okay, that's an interesting addition. But that's okay. I can see what you mean. I think maybe to my aid and not detriment, having seen the film first and then coming back to the book, there were again elements that I enjoyed were added. There was elements that I enjoyed the visual aspect of and like how it was adapted to screen. I will agree that these action scenes, that scaffolding chase, the gun, the self-defense bit, also the train actually getting hit by the snow.
Yeah.
Kind of, felt like very different.
Because so I also liked in the book, so obviously there is a train that's heading to Istanbul, from somewhere. Can't remember.
I can't remember.
Anyway, he boards
it's early on.
And even in the movie, it starts off with him solving this case in Syria, which I didn't feel was necessary.
To me, for at least the film, it just introduces you to like this is in a nutshell who Hercule Poirot is.
Yeah,
and I didn't mind it because to me it added. Not saying that there's no humor in the book because there are moments that are kind of like chuckle worthy and there's a bit of what would the word be? Like, I think Agatha Christie has this sort of like fun, snarky way she writes certain things. I found that the humor of Hercule Poirot, a lot of it which comes through Kenneth Branagh's very camp lens of looking at it.
My favorite thing is Kenneth Branagh.
He is, and he remains the best thing in the trilogy, both as a director and as Hercule Poirot. I didn't mind that opening scene because I got like, okay, this is how smart he is, and also he can be a little bitchy little fella. Like he can say some really funny, like snarky little things.
Essentially, he's uncovering a lost religious relic in Syria, and it comes down to
a rabbi, a priest, and an imam, which is great. He's like, it's just lazy joke.
That was funny.
Okay, that's good.
And then essentially, it's actually plot twist. The police sergeant who
it kind of gets for me. It got it would get the audience prepared to be like. This is what you're about to watch for 2 hours in a nutshell. So like expect twists, expect turns, expect humor, and expect a really intelligent man doing. But it's not in the book.
It's one of these things that like I understand why they did it for the movie, but for me, having read the book, I just like it was one of those things that felt really glaringly obvious,
especially because the book kind of just begins.
Yeah,
he meets Miss Debenham with the first few pages, right?
And there's just more comments about how he's a world famous detective.
Totally,
it's more just done through people going, "Oh, you're Hercule Poirot," rather than
everyone's
showing his detective skills. But something I like about that is that you don't really understand what you're in for with him until the crime is getting solved, and you're like, wow. Whereas in the movie, you're like, oh, okay, you're a really good detective.
You're going to be insane.
It sort of takes off that because you don't take him very seriously, and that's Agatha Christie's. He does that on purpose.
Yes,
so that
he's very
people he's interviewing and stuff don't take him that seriously and don't see him as being. Capable of.
If you were trying to outsmart him, you would think you were getting away with it, which is part of his ploy.
Whereas as the audience, we already know that's not true in the movie because of the start.
And in some ways, I think the people know that as well because he is always he's very kind and very funny and is very witty. But then as soon as the murder happens, but even still, before that, people who are running up to him, like you get that governor guy who ends up coming to him when we meet Monsieur Book, who is
Mr. Book.
Completely different book to film, a completely different person.
I did not. A lot of the characters were not.
There's a lot of changes.
Yeah,
the characters are the same by name, basically. If some positions have changed, like I think.
The doctor.
The doctor is a colonel in the book.
And the doctor's a separate character. And
he's a different character,
they combined the two.
Which is interesting, right? So, but when that guy approaches him and he's like, is this he has a tonal shift immediately. That's quite interesting to be like, he goes from the loving, everyone loves Hercule Poirot, the person, and he's like, I am the greatest detective. Yeah. I love that he says that. That's one of my favorite lines. I was like, who are you? He's like, I am Hercule Poirot, and I am probably the greatest detective in the world. I'm like, that to me, I'm like, okay, I kind of love that. It's kind of true. It is. So there's you're right. There's some glaring tonal differences in the book and the film. So which, having liked the movie before going into the book, were definitely noticeable. But I think from an enjoyment factor, like I'm not I'm not sitting here going like Murder on the Orient Express is a top even 200 film for me.
Yeah.
But having watched this trilogy and how much it leans into its camp, I just have a lot of fun with it. To me, it's a bit of a silly murder mystery.
Yeah.
Whereas the
totally
book isn't. The book is fun. It is a lot of fun, but it does take its murder mystery a lot more seriously.
It's definitely different tones. And I think there's so many points to point out at different points of the movie, which is like I'm struggling with how to tackle this.
Well,
something if we put him on the train, so he's on the train.
Totally, yeah.
And the train gets snowed in. So in the book.
Yes.
In the movie, it gets derailed.
Derailed by snow coming down and So, because in the book they don't even realize it, right? They wake up one day and they're like, oh, the train stops. Yeah.
We're buried in snow. And to me in the book, the fact that they're snowed in and cannot leave this train adds a great element of claustrophobia.
Totally.
And you're in this carriage stuck with a murderer
with
and a dead body.
Yep.
Like it just adds this level of like intensity. Whereas in the movie, they're out of the train and he's having a picnic with Miss Debenham out in the fucking snow. And
that to me seemed like a very cold picnic.
I know. It lost that like I'm on a train with a murderer, which is like a big part of the feelings.
It's literally it's the overbearing atmosphere that makes it even more thrilling than it is.
But obviously they sort of lose that.
They do. They absolutely lose that a little bit
with the way they did it. But I think it was just more dramatic, and they could obviously break up the scenery because the book is literally him in a room, and they come in one by one interviews.
Which I will say, I was very intrigued and enjoyed the structure of this book because it's told in three parts. I can't remember, it's 3 parts basically. And you have this real traditional narrative opening, which is everything's written in Hercule Poirot's third person, like it's a person basically telling the story. And there is still the descriptive dialogue. You get a good sense of what everything is. And the third act of the book is that as well, very traditionally written like a novel. I like how this middle portion is structured because it's just every interview, like you said, someone goes out, someone comes in, and we basically get a transcript of the dialogue, and it's up to you to sort of pick up, and that's something I do appreciate the book. It's up to you to sort of pick up what dialogue you think is important and what tone you believe it's being said in, because it doesn't say like, let's just say Miss Debenham goes, and I was in my carriage at 1:15. Hercule Poirot looked at her with interest because she said it in this way. There's nothing like that. It's basically like you just have to take as an audience member, as a reader, to take that information in. And I think I've never read a book that's done it.
Yeah, it was very
so simply, and I liked that. I really enjoyed the way it was presented.
And then when it's revealed what he's divulged from this conversation that you've not really picked up a lot of these things. Like it's very interesting.
The way the clues are left in the book are very interesting, where every conversation that happens in the movie is specific and on purpose and has to be done within a less than 2 hour period.
And I also think in the movie, with every conversation, everyone seems guilty. Whereas in the book, with every conversation, everyone seems innocent. Which I think is more intriguing because you're like, well, they couldn't have, after the interview, you're like, well, they couldn't have done it. Well, they couldn't have done it. Yeah. Well, they couldn't have done it.
Because
who's left on the train?
Yes.
You know? It's like...
That's very interesting. I didn't think about it that way, but now you've said it. That's a very interesting point because... The film is, and maybe
it's
just
all them looking really guilty in the
everyone
film
looks
from
guilty.
First shot.
And everyone's
which
kind
makes
of
sense later. But.
Everyone's against it. It makes complete sense. It seems like everyone's against Poirot initially. That's the thing. Like everyone's like, I don't want him to find out my secret, sort of thing. So that's very. I wonder. I do wonder whether that is because in murder mystery film format, that seems like the traditional narrative, right? Is everyone is guilty until proven innocent in a murder mystery story.
Yeah.
So maybe as film watchers, we are so conditioned to that they made the conscious decision to do it that way, potentially. I don't know.
It just
but
makes
it's
it
interesting.
more exciting.
I think I agree with you. Yeah.
And like still in the movie, they give their reasons it couldn't have been them. And like, you know, but they just seem like every chapter I read of the book, I was like, every time someone had finished an interview, I'm like, well, how could they have done it?
And you going into it blind would have been so much fun.
It was
even when they summarize, there's a once the second I'll just call it second portion of the book is finished, and the Doctor, Hercule, and Monsieur Book are all confiding in each other and sort of breaking down the evidence. The summary that he does of each character even still was like, okay, like how the hell are you going to pick this?
Yeah.
So,
but then in the end, he's like, I have known for some time who the murderer is.
he just loves the process.
And
He
you're
was
like, but how?
he just loves the drama. He's a little showman, Hercule Poirot. I guess for context too, we should talk about the murder itself. So obviously there's the murder. It's on the Orient Express. Who would have thought? But there's all these people traveling to Istanbul, and I guess you could say he's like a quasi sort of gangster, Mr. Ratchet.
You can tell he's dodgy.
He's dodgy, and then he's played in the film by Johnny Depp, who plays him basically like he's played his gangster characters in the past. He's got this thick New York accent. He has a very intimidating presence. He like bullies his way basically into things.
And he thinks someone's out to get him.
He does think someone's out to get him because of it's initially thought to be money issues, but obviously what is revealed later on is different.
So he's traveling under the name of Ratchet.
Ratchet, yep.
And then Hercule Poirot discovers through his investigations that his real name is actually Cassetti, who is a wanted. Well, he was escaped a crime in America.
Yeah.
Or he got off.
He got off basically, and he's run away. Like he's basically like, don't stay in the country. He's got to run away.
Yeah,
so,
but he was definitely guilty.
Yes.
And he's got off scot-free.
Off scot-free.
Essentially. And he kidnapped the daughter
Yes.
of a very affluent family with the mum. The mum was a movie star, or the mother's mum was a movie star.
The mother's mum was a movie star and a director.
Yeah.
Like she was like big in,
And essentially they had this baby Daisy. The family was lovely. They loved their little girl. She was kidnapped.
Yes.
And they paid the ransom, but she was
They said that
murdered.
similar to the real life story that's sort of semi-based on.
And there was also a maid who was basically blamed for being involved, and she killed herself as well. So
it's pretty heavy shit.
It was terrible. Like, it was known
very bad
across
situation.
the globe.
It was
the story because it was so horrible.
So then that's all central to the narrative because then Mr. Ratchet is found dead.
Yeah.
He's been stabbed to death in his carriage. He's found by Poirot in the movie. Is he? Yeah, he's found by Poirot in the movie.
The train attendant?
Poirot finds him in the movie and then the train attendant finds him in the book, I believe.
Yeah,
and then that's when they come to him and he's like, Mr. Ratchet's dead. He's like, oh, hello.
So I'm meant to be on holiday. I'm reading Charles Dickens.
I want to eat my pastries.
Him reading Charles Dickens is so funny too.
funny.
He's just chuckling reading Charles Dickens. It's so funny.
Oh my God. Oh God. I love him so much. And it becomes, there's these intricacies there because then obviously everyone's a suspect to Poirot because there's rooms that are interconnected by bathrooms or passageways and stuff. Certain materials.
The room was locked on the inside. So it's like, how did they escape? Things are left, like there was a train conductor jacket left in someone's... A button,
that's right.
And then it was in the suit.
So all these things
there's all these intricate little
and then
details.
the murder weapon was...
he was stabbed 12 times.
He was stabbed 12 times, that's right. So
and all the wounds looked different.
That's like he was stabbed by someone with left hand, right hand, up, down, sideways. Like
different levels of strength.
So many inconsistencies. And so Poirot's like, nah, you're all suspects until we find it out. So then obviously while the train is bogged in the snow, does all his interviews and stuff. So and then so in the movie, I should say in the book, like we were saying, it's pretty much like one by one interviews with everyone, as you would, right? Like you just get everyone in, you take all their information, then you cross-check any information you need to check. In the film, because I do feel like that could have been very boring to watch.
They definitely tried to spice it up.
They spiced it up and there's a lot of interchange and things are revealed, at different points than they are in the book. Some of it works and some of it doesn't. However, I do think, because I don't want to spoil all the clues and reveals, but thinking about where it leads to, I do like how I think it's definitely heightened intentionally. It's supposed to feel very grandiose and over the top, but I like the reveal and how it's portrayed at the end. I love how it's written in the book because when Hercule Poirot reveals who the killer is, it's very, it's very sort of like you said, he's known the whole time and he's almost angry at himself. He didn't get it quicker. This was a challenge for him, right? he's in the movie, Poirot seems actually very hurt by it. Like some people that he thought he trusted, he didn't. And then it becomes more about, oh, I understand why they did this.
I think, the movie has something that the book doesn't, and that is Poirot's
emotionally manipulative music, because it worked on me. So yeah.
No, it does. It has that. But essentially, I'll probably have to talk about the ending.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So everyone on the train ended up being connected to this family, and it was actually a very well-planned murder to make it look like someone had jumped onto the train at a certain point, a stranger murdered him and left. And they would have gone away for it too if it wasn't for
the meddling kids. But
for Hercule Poirot.
Yes.
And
who we should mention was not intended to be on the train. He was taking the train to go to this case,
Pure
and he asked his
coincidence.
friend Monsieur Book to get him a seat on the train.
Yeah.
So it very much so, if I was, spoiler alert, Mrs. Hubbard, who is not Mrs. Hubbard, who is Mrs. What's her name?
She's actually the mum
She's
of
the mum of
daughter.
the daughter whose daughter was
taken,
killed.
and then she lost her baby in childbirth because she was so distraught, and they all died.
It was awful. It was dreadful. If I was because you know her as Mrs. Hubbard throughout most of the book and the film, I'd be like, fuck. I was like, this is not what
they act so calm when he gets on. He's like,
Yeah.
hello, everyone. I'm Hercule Poirot, the world's best detective.
And she's
they're
the
like,
first
"Oh my
person who
God."
has a conversation with him properly has a
But
conversation
she's
with him
a
in the
really
film.
good actress. Like, that's the whole point. Her character is very different in the book to
book,
the film.
very
in the
much
book,
so.
she's trying to be this like clucky old mother who's like, my daughter said this would be the safest way for me to get
Yes,
there. I
yeah.
can't believe there's been a murder. When my daughter hears about this, she'll be so upset.
So it's true, though.
And then,
Yeah.
but in this, she's more of that like cougar on the prowl, trying to find
It's
husband
Michelle
number
Pfeiffer.
5.
It's Michelle Pfeiffer, man.
Yeah.
She's hot. Like, I get it.
I don't think it like
It
ruined
doesn't, no,
anything.
it doesn't. It's
Like,
just
she
a
still
different
was
character.
sort of silly and like.
She played the intentional, like, ditzy blonde sort of thing, which is even better to the reveal when she takes off her wig and she's not blonde
and she's
at all.
very serious.
Quickly, we'll run back to this because I just want to touch on it because the biggest character changes is Monsieur Book, right? Monsieur Book, who is also, he's Belgian in the book, but he also seems as, he's like a more uptight Hercule Poirot, you know what I mean? Like he's a bit more serious and a bit more steadfast, where in the film, he's a young, brash English man who is a good friend of Hercule Poirot, but has his vices.
Yeah.
Loves prostitution.
Prostitutes.
Loves alcohol, and he's a bit more carefree and fun. Which book did you like better? Did you like the book or the movie book?
It didn't really like.
It didn't bother me.
It didn't bother me. I wasn't that attached to.
Loved him in the film though, because I think he's a very fun
a good-
character, and
yeah.
he is a recurring character. When he pops up,
is
it's
he?
always he pops up in the.
Oh no, he's in Death in the Nile. I
Death in the
remember that.
Nile, and it's really fun.
Yeah.
I just think
Oh,
it
wait.
adds
Oh,
energy. He at the end,
Yeah.
he
Bit of spoiler. Sorry, everyone.
Whoops. I think he adds a lot of fun energy to the film as well. So I just wanted to bring that up. But sorry,
Yeah.
back to Mrs. Hubbard and the
So-
overall reveal.
Yeah. So essentially, they've all known
Before
this.
we reveal it, should you say where you thought it was going
Yes,
first?
okay.
Let's say, yeah.
So, when we found out he was Cassetti,
Yes.
and there's a lot of talk that at the beginning, there's a lot of talk about basically a man and a woman being involved.
Yes.
Originally,
Yes, totally,
one
yeah,
man
yeah.
and one woman.
Yep.
And I thought that Daisy actually hadn't been murdered, and that was a different body set up, and he'd actually just kidnapped her,
Gone. Yeah.
and she was alive,
Yes.
and was working with someone
With
to
someone else.
get her vengeance on him because she'd found out who she really
Interesting.
was.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
I like that a
But
lot,
that's
actually.
not where it went.
That's not where it goes, no, because unfortunately, this is it's still dead.
Yeah, but I mean,
I know that's very interesting because that would have been, if you can pull
and then
that
she
off.
would have
and
been
it's-
reunited with the grandmother, which would have
right?
been lovely.
Which would have been beautiful. So, but
no.
that's not to be, unfortunately, but I like where you're going with that. You should,
My murder mystery is coming out.
we'll bleep that whole
It's
section.
just
that we-
basically the Orient Express, but just that's changed.
You've written the alternate ending. Yeah, you copy paste everything else but like the last 7 pages.
yeah, pretty much. None of the facts add up anymore.
No,
or anything, but I'm
yeah,
just
it's like,
like,
listen.
you better.
And just because he said it means it's right. Like
Yeah,
that's the thing. If nothing
100%.
adds up, he
Who would
could
question?
just be.
But tell us what actually happened, Nick, because it wasn't
So
that.
it's a fantastic. I'll talk about it in the film sense because I love the way the film portrays it. But he basically announces that he wants everyone to get together. I think if I recall correctly, in the movie, he brings them all to the dining cart.
Yeah, they're sitting outside, aren't they, all lined up?
Initially, yeah. No, in the book as well, right?
No, in the book,
film,
it's in the dining car.
In the book, it's the dining cart.
Yeah.
In the film, they're all outside.
Yeah, in that tunnel.
In the tunnel just before. And he's got the guards there. He's got like the train attendants and stuff as the guard, and Monsieur Book's there. And Monsieur Book is very much, he's like on it. He's like, this is bad press for the Orient Express. Like, we need, especially with Poirot's uncertainty of who he thinks it is initially, Book's like, we need a suspect and we need them to be like basically committed, and she needs to put them in jail because like it's bad for the Orient Express basically.
Yeah, and in the movie there's also the reason that Poirot has taken this case on is because of the backgrounds of some people on the train.
Exactly, yeah. It would get out.
They would be pinned for the crime even if they were innocent. So that's what Mr. Book puts on the table. If you don't try to solve this crime, I can't save
whether
these
it's like
people.
class status, color of skin, things like that. Yeah.
Whereas in the book, he just goes, "You are the world's greatest detective. Please help me." And Poirot goes,
like,
"Yes, I will."
I guess I am probably the greatest detective in the world.
We are on this train. Why not?
I was just going to sit here with T.M. Pestres and Charles Dickens.
He definitely puts up more of a fight in the movie, whereas in the book he's like,
which I kind of like as well. It's great. So everyone, and I just love the way the film puts it. So they're all sitting. It's like this Last Supper sort of table, and Poirot comes out and does his speech, and he's basically like, for days now, I've been talking to you all, and none of this has added up. We don't know why, why Ratchet is dead, who then they obviously found out is not Ratchet. And I've been putting the clues together, and all of you have these alibis and things like that. But he's like, but there would only be one way for it to be so airtight. Is that all of you were in on it. You are all the murderer. And when he said, I remember when I watched the movie the first time, I saw it in cinemas. I was kind of floored. I was the same thing. I was like, how are they going to pull this off? I was like, they're all the murderers. And what the movie does really well, while Poirot is explaining the connection to this Armstrong case and the kidnapping and how everyone is connected to each other, in the film, it goes back to black and white and shows us how they're all meeting before getting on the Orient Express and then them executing the plan. That shot of them all getting out of their cabins just before they stab Ratchet is quite impressive. And then because it's M in Australia, PG-13 in the States, you don't see Ratchet getting stabbed. You don't physically see it, but you see, let's just say the camera's here, his body's there. Like, you're not missing a lot. And it's brutal. It's a brutal.
There's a lot of anger. And a lot of anger pain.
That I didn't, it's hard to write that in the book, right? Like, the big part of the book and the reveal is that he's like, you all did it, basically. And then he goes and talks about the connections. I love how the film portrayed it. And then you find out the mastermind behind it all was Mrs. Hubbard, who is actually Mrs. Debenham, basically.
No, Miss Debenham's the English.
She's the English lady,
nurse,
sorry. The nurse.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's right, because the connection to the other person.
What's the family name of the
Daisy? It's Armstrong,
Daisy
isn't it?
Armstrong.
It's Armstrong.
So she would be the
Mrs.
woman.
Armstrong.
Yeah.
You find out that she, basically because she was a director, a big movie star and a director, she played this all like a big film basically and like how she would have filmed set. Yeah. And was controlling everyone and had everything set up to pull off this basically flawless crime and a crime of passion as well, honestly.
And she even says at the end, just put the blame on me. Like, I will take the fall.
Shit, when Poirot hands the gun to her.
Yeah.
Not in the book.
See, this is the thing. Like, you're sort of excited, whereas I'm just like, okay. So I think something that the movie does, which I liked and disliked at the same time. Don't ask me how that's possible.
No, it's absolutely possible. Yeah.
So at the start of the film, Hercule makes a comment on the Syria case where he says there is good and there is bad, or there is right and there is wrong, and there is no in between.
There's no in between. Yeah.
So that doesn't happen in the book, but in the movie, they're trying to play him as this very black and white character of justice.
It's his moral conflict eventually that he has to overcome, right?
And then at the end, he's faced with this dilemma where there's been
a crime.
12 people who've murdered someone, whereas he doesn't view any of them as murderers because they're not. It's a revenge crime, but it's like it seems like a just. It's hard to be. It's hard to be like.
it's always like, imagine if someone killed someone in your family and you got the chance to kill them. You know what I mean? Like if it was really heinous and awful and stuff, right? You kind of go,
and they escaped
what's
jail.
the morality
so
of
he
that?
didn't even get any justice.
No,
That's
exactly.
the worst
There's
thing.
no
Like,
justice at all.
Nothing.
So why do you take justice into your own hands? Actually, complete random side note. I watched a documentary recently that literally deals with this in Australia. And it's a true story of 3 brothers who found out that their dad, when they immigrated to Australia after the war, hunted down Nazis in Australia and killed them, revenge killings. So it's like a real thing. It's a similar thing. Like, because imagine that, right? You know, like the greatest atrocity in modern history. And then you see them down the street and you're like, oh, you know, I was a killer overseas. I will kill this person in Australia. So it's a similar thing. Like this awful crime has happened to a child.
Yeah,
like,
and he could be doing it
justice.
to more children. Like
Absolutely.
and you know, and so when it all comes out, I didn't want any of them to get punished.
No,
because I was like,
justice has been served, right?
In both the book and the film, essentially when Poirot does his big explanations, he says there is one. There's 2 solutions. One, someone came into the train when we stopped, murdered Ratchet,
and ran
left
off
the train, and that is the answer. Or the second answer, and then he divulges that they all made this elaborate plan. In the book, he says basically, Mr. Book, you decide whether we charge them or not. Like he's not really, he's kind of like whatever.
Yeah.
But in the movie, because of this commentary he's made at the start about black and white,
it's got to be his.
He is
moral.
like more struggling with
He's
this idea
got to overcome
of,
his moral dilemma, right?
Yeah, of like seeing the grey in between.
Totally.
And this is where this big thing with the gun comes in, which Nick's like, it was really awesome. And I'm like, it was lame.
I'm a simple man, Georja Malt.
A man who didn't see the love story in the new Star Wars.
I didn't know. Much to my loss. Because he puts down a gun in front of Mrs. Hubbard, who's obviously no longer Mrs. Hubbard, Mrs. Armstrong, and she goes to shoot herself.
No, but he says to her, if you don't want this crime coming out, you'll have to shoot me. He says that to all of them. So it's essentially a test because if they murder him, then obviously they're killers.
They're killers,
they're actual criminals.
Yes.
But no one moves to take the gun because they're not killers.
No, exactly.
They're not bad people.
Yes.
They just, had something awful happen.
Took justice
and they can't move on. They can't move on with him living scot-free.
With doing it, And
essentially, she picks up the gun. And you're like, oh, she's gonna shoot him.
She's gonna do it.
But then she goes to
shoot herself,
which is a bit selfish because I don't know.
It is,
or she's hoping they'll pin it on her.
They'll pin it on her, right?
Dead.
But at the same time, I feel like that for her character is like that's the arc done. She's actually gotten what she dedicated the last years of her life to, right? Like justice has been served. She can, in a kind of actually sad way, die. You know what I mean? Like and there's no bullets in the gun. And obviously she has her big cry and meltdown and stuff like that. And
he kind of feels better about leaving it then because none of them
are killers, right? Yeah. So and then it's then decided that it's like, and Monsieur Book's like freaking out. He's like, what are we gonna do? He's like, well, no, like we will not talk about. And it's kind of great how he's like, this is what we're going to say. Like, this is not how people will find out what happened. Like, what happened on this train will never leave the Orient Express, basically.
Yeah. And he's like, I hope you can find some peace.
Yes.
Yeah.
And,
it's so weird he's Belgian.
And he has a French accent.
Well, I think they do certain parts of Belgium do speak in French dialect. But he's so iconically French. And then when I read this and he was Belgian, I was like...
You're like, wait a second, what the hell?
I was like, okay.
Well, I guess it makes his affinity for French pastries and chocolate very much so apparent. But yeah, and then it ends with the train reaching its destination. They're able to get the train back on the road and they all go their separate ways. Not before... another case is offered to Hercule Poirot, which this is not in the book. It's very much like the how do we continue this cinematic universe, which then leads to Death on the Nile.
Is he in Egypt investigating another murder when he gets wrapped up in the case?
Of course.
Because I can't really remember.
It's how it always happens to Hercule Poirot.
He's
investigating something else and then he's invited to the party on the boat and then there's a murder on the Nile. Of course.
God, the man just can't have a holiday.
He can't have a holiday. Well, then,
and that's... Read's Charles Dickens.
This new one, Haunting in Venice, is...
Yeah, I'm keen to see it.
Because there's no actual Agatha Christie book, Haunting in Venice. It's an adaptation of Halloween Party and I believe another book. I can't remember which one.
Halloween Party.
Yeah, there's a actor called Halloween Party, yeah.
Oh.
And it's about a seance. And in this one, the seance is after someone's daughter has died. They do a seance to see if they can connect with her again, but then weird things start happening. And it's more of I say horror film, but it's not. And look, this is coming from me who watches, like, I could watch horror a minute before bed and sleep like a baby. So
God. Not for me.
There are jump scares and stuff, but it's more of imagine like an Agatha Christie horror. Imagine like a Hercule Poirot horror.
Okay.
It's not going to disturb you forever.
So it's like not any worse than an episode of Scooby-Doo.
I would say it's like that with like just like darker themes.
Yeah, okay.
A lot more murder than Scooby-Doo, you know? So
Yeah, not much murder.
that's where that leads. That's where the film trilogy leads onto. So was there anything else you wanted to discuss about the film or
You know what? I think that was really my main
Did you have I guess wrapping up, what was your favorite part of the book, favorite part of the movie? What was the thing that stood out the most to you?
I mean, like I loved that Kenneth Branagh's portrayal of Hercule Poirot. That was probably the standout thing for me.
The best part of this.
I wouldn't
this movie.
say any of the characters in the movie were particularly how I imagined them in the book.
They're
but
quite changed, aren't they?
It didn't faze me that much.
And some get a lot more screen time than others. That's probably my only issue with the film is that you get to know every character quite well in the book because they literally have a chapter dedicated to them.
And that's why it's more surprising, whereas in the movie they're all just a bunch of randos kind of, and you haven't had that time to be shocked because you're like, I've seen you talk for 30 seconds.
So the movie doesn't adapt every character or give every character enough screen time for that.
So I think, but I loved the way it looked. Like you said,
it's a beautiful looking film.
Loved the look, loved him.
Yep.
I thought overall it was fine, but I mean, I think it's been pretty obvious through my commentary that I definitely preferred the book.
Yes. So, I mean, and look, hey, common theme on this show.
It's not really surprising at this point.
This is a struggle for me, Georgia.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to lie.
You're not going to use your tie, are you?
No, I'm not going to use my tie.
God, you're keeping those close.
I'm keeping them very close to like... I mean, depending how long this show goes on for,
who knows?
If we're doing this 20 years down the line,
we've only got three
I still want those ties there just in case.
Three ties for the life of the show.
I'll use them for the last 3 episodes.
You would.
I would, just to piss people off.
Me, particularly.
Literally, mainly you. I think... I literally, unlike everyone else in the world, I really do enjoy this movie and I really do enjoy this trilogy. I have a lot of fun with them.
Like, okay.
But I do think, and I will admit this.
You're just like Kenneth Branagh and doing his accent. That's what you like. You like the mustache. You don't like anything else.
Well, in Death on the Nile, you find out how he got the moustache too, which is...
I don't even remember that.
It's the opening scene in black and white when he's in the war and he has the grenade blow up on his face. He has the giant scar.
That's right. Oh my God.
Because he's a fucking war hero too.
Just adding on to it.
But Georgia, I will admit to you that you are correct. I love Kenneth Branagh. I love him in front of the camera and I love him behind the camera. The murder mystery is fine. But God, like I love him so much. He unfortunately is only a part of the film.
Yeah.
Whereas the book, this to me is the most interestingly structured book we've done on the show. And I was quite immersed by that. I will say the book was better than the film.
From like the way that the murder mystery plays out.
It's very intriguing.
This is a murder mystery.
It's a quick read too. Like that's an easy read to get through. You fly through it because especially that second portion where you finish when you're like, well, I got to see what the next person says. And I got to see what the next person says.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's great.
And it's also just got such like a cozy quaintness about it, which sounds weird to say about a murder mystery, but I want to be drinking a tea and eating a scone on the Orient Express reading this.
Just
like it's just got this charm about it.
It really does.
Like, not like Little Women, obviously, but you know how we couldn't
we were so it's so
reading
charming.
It. Yeah,
it's so
like
charming.
He is so charming. The way she writes is so charming.
We would just love to have tea and scones with
Hercule. I really would.
There we go. For the last one of the year, the book wins. The book wins once more. We should do... I will have a tally. I'll have a tally on the next episode but I have a funny feeling books may have dominated the year that was 2023. So,
a little landslide.
Look, thank you all for watching the show this year.
There's a reason that the book was better.
There's a reason
the book was better.
It's in the name. The book was better. The book was better. I think Hercule Poirot would also think this book was better.
Yeah, probably.
But thank you all for watching and listening to the show this year. It means a lot to both of us. We have a lot of fun doing it.
Absolutely.
Like I said, it's a big time commitment watching a movie, reading a full book, and then recording an hour-long podcast about it every month. But we love doing it.
We love it.
This isn't obviously not the final episode of the year. We are going to be doing a Christmas special, which I think will be a lot of fun. And there is the quintessential Christmas story that we will be covering. And it's not going to be more of a what was better, the book or the film, because what we are doing is we are going to be reading Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And we're both going to be
trying to. I've never read it before.
I've never read it before. Rhiannon, I'll show you. Rhiannon just bought a copy yesterday.
Okay.
That's like a beautiful, I don't want to read that copy because it's beautiful, but it's like the quintessential Christmas story. But we're not going to be pitting a movie against a book. We're going to both be picking our favorite version of A Christmas Carol to watch and discuss. So you've picked yours.
Yes, I want to do the musical one.
You're doing the musical version, and I'm doing what I think, to the musical version, is the greatest Christmas Carol adaptation.
It's really good.
It's the Muppets Christmas Carol. It is the
really good.
best adaptation of A Christmas Carol ever.
It's amazing.
Oscar-worthy performance from Michael Caine. So that
you
is
know
going
what? Honestly, I feel like it. I feel like that's it.
There's no discussion.
Yeah.
You're not even getting the episode now. You just need to know the Muppets Christmas Carol.
I feel like
is
the
greatest
only people
of all
who would
time.
ever like the musical one are me and Rhiannon.
Literally, and she was so happy you picked it because it means we have to watch it. So, but that'll be coming out Christmas Eve, so you'll be getting a little pre-Christmas present from us here at The Book Was Better.
Joy.
A little Christmas joy. But as we wrap up, Georgia, where can everyone find you on the internet?
You can find me on Instagram at withg.co.
And you find me at nicksflicksfix, Instagram, X, everywhere that there's a handle you need. It's nicksflicksfix. So
It's there, except TikTok.
Except TikTok. I'm not on there. We'll talk about that.
Anyway,
I know
well,
you need
strategy meeting after this.
Business,
Is that your digital presence?
It's
all work. What happened to our friendship?
There's no friends. All business. Until
Nick and I just shake hands now when we see each other. Not even
no hugs anymore. It's just all business now. We're keeping everything above board, HR friendly. Until the Christmas episode of The Book Was Better, we appreciate you guys watching. See you on the next one.
Bye.